The air in the Supreme Court chamber crackled with tension, as if the marble walls themselves held their breath. Jasmine Crockett stood at the podium, her hands gripping the edges, her eyes fixed on the 9 justices before her. The case, United States versus Harper, was no ordinary dispute. It centered on a citizen's right to shield private financial records from government seizure without a warrant, a battle over liberty that had drawn a packed gallery of reporters and lawmakers. Jasmine, a little-known attorney from Texas, had fought her way to this moment, but the weight of the room's scrutiny pressed hard against her. Justice Neil Gorsuch leaned forward, his sharp gaze cutting through the chamber like a blade. He adjusted his glasses, a smirk tugging at his lips, and interrupted Jasmine mid-sentence as she outlined her argument. "Counselor, are you seriously relying on a 19th-century property law to defend a modern privacy claim?" His voice dripped, with condescension, loud enough to stir murmurs from the audience. "This is the Supreme Court, not a county courthouse. Do you have anything resembling a relevant precedent, or are we wasting our time?" Jasmine's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady, refusing to flinch. She was no stranger to being underestimated, a black woman in a field dominated by Ivy League elites. Justice Gorsuch, with respect, the principle of individual sovereignty over personal property, whether physical or digital, is timeless. The Fourth Amendment doesn't bend to your impatience. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Her words were bold, bordering on insolent, and the other justices exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Gorsuch's face reddened, his fingers drumming the bench. "You're lecturing me on the Constitution," he snapped, his tone venomous. "I've been interpreting it longer than you've been out of law school. Your argument is a relic, and frankly, it's embarrassing." He leaned back, folding his arms as if daring her to continue. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the raw hostility between them. Some whispered that Jasmine had overstepped, that she'd crumble under Gorsuch's attack. But Jasmine didn't waver. She straightened her shoulders, her voice growing firmer, each word deliberate. "If the court finds protecting a citizen's private records from unchecked government power embarrassing, then we're not just debating law, we're debating freedom." The room fell silent, the weight of her challenge hanging heavy. Even Chief Justice Roberts raised an eyebrow, his pen pausing over his notes. Jasmine's heart pounded, but she pressed on, citing a 1967 case, Katz versus United States, to anchor her point. "The expectation of privacy isn't a relic, Justice Gorsuch. It's a right." The gallery buzzed, sensing a shift. Gorsuch's smirk faded, replaced by a scowl. He opened his mouth to retort, but Jasmine didn't give him the chance. She pivoted to the facts of Harper's case, detailing how the government had seized bank records without a warrant, claiming national security. Her voice rose, sharp and commanding, as she painted a vivid picture of a citizen stripped of protections. "If this court allows such overreach, what stops the government from rifling through every American's life?" "Your life, Justice Gorsuch." The audacity of her question stunned the room. Gorsuch's eyes narrowed, his voice low and menacing. "You're out of line, Counselor. Stick to the law, not personal attacks." But Jasmine didn't back down. She sensed his anger but also a flicker of unease. She was hitting a nerve, and she knew it. The other justices leaned forward, their attention locked on her. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the end of her allotted time. But Jasmine wasn't done. She had one more point to make, one that could turn the tide, as she drew a breath, preparing to deliver her final argument for the session. The chamber felt like a powder keg, ready to explode. Jasmine's defiance had set the stage for a battle not just of law, but of wills. Gorsuch's hostility was a wall, but she was ready to tear it down, brick by brick, with every word she spoke. Jasmine's pulse thundered in her ears as she launched into her final point, the Supreme Court chamber hanging on her every word. She refused to let Gorsuch's glare unnerve her, his arms still crossed, his expression a mask of disdain. The gallery, packed with reporters scribbling furiously, seemed to lean closer, sensing the stakes rising. She pointed to a stack of documents on the podium, her voice cutting through the tension like a whip. The government's claim of national security in Harper's case is a flimsy excuse, unsupported by evidence. They've produced no threat, no justification, just a fishing expedition into a citizen's life. Gorsuch snorted, loud enough to echo off the walls. "Flimsy?" he barked, cutting her off again. "You're accusing the United States of bad faith in my courtroom? That's bold for someone who can barely string a coherent argument together." His words were a slap, meant to humiliate, and the audience stirred, some nodding in agreement, others wincing at his cruelty. Justice Kagan shot him a sidelong glance, her lips pursed, but she said nothing. The silence from the bench felt like a judgment of its own. Jasmine's fingers tightened on the podium, her knuckles paling. She wanted to fire back, to call out his arrogance, but she knew the trap. Losing her temper would prove him right. Instead, she smiled, a sharp, controlled curve of her lips that made Gorsuch's eyes narrow. "I'm not accusing, Justice Gorsuch. I'm proving. The record shows the government accessed Harper's accounts without notifying him, without judicial oversight. That's not security, that's tyranny." Her voice was calm, but the word tyranny landed like a grenade, sparking gasps from the gallery. The room felt hotter, the air thick with anticipation. Gorsuch leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "You're treading on dangerous ground, counselor. You think you can waltz in here, throw around words like that, and school this court? I've seen better arguments from first-year law students." His contempt was palpable, each syllable dripping with scorn. The other justices shifted, their faces a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Justice Thomas scribbled something, his expression unreadable, while Justice Sotomayor's eyes flicked between Jasmine and Gorsuch, as if measuring the clash. Jasmine didn't blink. She stepped away from the podium, her heels clicking on the marble floor, a deliberate move to command the space. If this court thinks the government can seize private records without accountability, then it's not me who's on dangerous ground. It's every American. Her words were a challenge, aimed not just at Gorsuch but at the entire bench. The gallery erupted in whispers, some in awe, others in shock. A reporter dropped his pen, the clatter echoing in the charged silence. Gorsuch's face twisted, his patience fraying. "You're grandstanding," he snapped, slamming a hand on the bench. "This isn't a soapbox. Answer my question. Where's your precedent for this so-called right to financial privacy? Or are you just making it up as you go?" His tone was vicious, meant to dismantle her, but Jasmine was ready. She'd spent months preparing, poring over cases, anticipating every attack. She reached for a binder, flipping it open with a practiced motion, her voice steady as steel. "Griswold versus Connecticut, 1965, she began, her eyes locking with Gorsuch's. "The court recognized a zone of privacy inherent in the Constitution. Financial records, like medical records, fall within that zone. The government can't invade. Without a warrant, no matter how loudly it cries, 'security.'" Her argument was tight, her delivery flawless, and for the first time, Gorsuch hesitated, his mouth opening, then closing. The gallery sensed it, the shift in power, and the murmurs grew louder. Chief Justice Roberts cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the din. "Counselor, your time is nearly up. Conclude your point." Jasmine nodded, but her eyes never left Gorsuch. She was gaining ground, and she could feel it. The hostility between them was a live wire, sparking with every exchange, but she was turning his aggression against him. As she prepared to close, she knew her next words could either seal her triumph or ignite Gorsuch's wrath further, and she relished the gamble. The Supreme Court chamber seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as Jasmine Crockett stood tall, her binder open, her voice ringing with conviction. The gallery held its breath, pens poised, eyes darting between her and Justice Gorsuch, whose scowl deepened with every word she spoke. The clash had become a spectacle, a duel of intellect and will, and the stakes felt personal now. Jasmine's last point hung in the air, her citation of Griswold versus Connecticut, a direct challenge to Gorsuch's demand for precedent. She wasn't just arguing a case, she was fighting for her place in this room. Gorsuch's fingers twitched, his voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "Griswold? You're stretching a case about marital privacy to cover bank accounts?" He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that made the audience flinch. "That's not legal reasoning, that's desperation. You're out of your depth, counselor, and it shows." His words were a calculated jab, meant to rattle her, to make her doubt herself in front of the nation's highest court. A few spectators nodded, their whispers sharp with agreement, while others watched Jasmine, waiting for her to crack. Her chest tightened, the weight of his scorn heavy, but she refused to let it show. She closed her binder with a deliberate snap, the sound echoing in the tense quiet. Depth, Justice Gorsuch, is measured by understanding, not volume. The retort was swift, her tone ice-cold, and it landed like a slap. The gallery gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the crowd. Justice Kavanaugh's eyebrows shot up, and even Justice Alito, usually stoic, leaned forward, his pen still. Gorsuch's face flushed, his eyes blazing, but Jasmine pressed on, undeterred. She paced a step, her movements controlled, her voice gaining strength. The Constitution protects zones of privacy, whether it's a bedroom or a bank account. Harper's records were his life's work, his security, seized without cause. If that's not a violation, then what is? Her question was a dare, aimed squarely at Gorsuch, but she swept her gaze across the bench, drawing the other justices in. She cited another case, Boyd versus United States, 1886, weaving its logic seamlessly into her argument. The court has long held that personal papers are sacred from government intrusion. Digital or not, the principle stands. The room buzzed, the energy shifting. Reporters scribbled frantically, capturing every word, while spectators exchanged glances, sensing Gorsuch's grip on the debate slipping. He opened his mouth, his voice sharp and biting. "Boyd, you're digging up corpses now, counselor. This is a modern case, not a history lesson. Your citations are as outdated as your nerve." His insult was vicious, his tone meant to belittle, but it only fueled Jasmine's fire. She felt the eyes of the justices, the gallery, the nation, and she wasn't about to let him win. She stepped closer to the podium, her voice low but piercing. If protecting liberty is outdated, then this court has lost its purpose. Harper's case isn't about history, it's about power, and who gets to wield it. The words were a gauntlet, thrown at Gorsuch's feet, and the chamber erupted in murmurs. Justice Sotomayor nodded slightly, her expression thoughtful, while Chief Justice Roberts tapped his gavel lightly, a warning to keep order. Jasmine's heart raced, but she felt a surge of confidence, her argument taking root. Gorsuch leaned back, his lips a thin line, his silence louder than any retort. For the first time, he seemed unsure, his usual arrogance faltering. The other justices were watching Jasmine now, their attention undivided, and she seized the moment. She outlined the broader implications, her voice steady but urgent. If the government can take Harper's records, it can take anyone's, without reason, without restraint. That's not law, that's control. The gallery was riveted, the weight of her words sinking in. As she concluded, the clock showed her time was up, but the energy in the room was electric. Gorsuch's hostility had pushed her to the edge, but she'd turned it into strength, her argument sharper for it. The justices were poised to question her, and she knew Gorsuch wasn't done. His next move would be brutal, but Jasmine was ready, her mind racing with strategy, her resolve unbreakable. The Supreme Court gallery sat frozen, every eye locked on Jasmine Crockett as she stood poised at the podium, her final words about government control still echoing. The chamber felt like a battlefield, the air thick with the aftermath of her clash with Justice Gorsuch. His silence was a storm cloud, heavy with unspoken fury, and when he leaned forward, his voice was a low, dangerous hiss. "You speak of control, counselor, but you're the one trying to dictate to this court with your half-baked theories. Do you have anything left, or are you just wasting our time?" His words were a final attempt to crush her, laced with venom that made the audience shift uneasily. Jasmine's eyes met his, unflinching, her voice steady as stone. "I'm not dictating, Justice Gorsuch. I'm defending. And if you think the Constitution is a waste of time, that's a problem for this bench, not me." The gallery erupted, a wave of gasps and murmurs swallowing the room. Chief Justice Roberts banged his gavel, his face stern, but Jasmine didn't falter. She'd faced Gorsuch's fire and turned it into fuel, her argument now a beacon in the tense chamber. The other justices watched, their expressions a mix of intrigue and respect, even as Gorsuch's scowl deepened. She pivoted, addressing the full bench, her tone commanding yet clear. "Harper's case is a line in the sand. If the government can seize private records without a warrant, no one is safe. Not farmers, not teachers, not justices." Her words were deliberate, each one landing with precision. She drew on a final case, Riley versus California 2014, tying its protection of digital privacy to Harper's bank records. The court ruled that even a phone needs a warrant. Why should a citizen's life savings get less? The logic was airtight, her delivery unshakable, and the gallery buzzed with awe. Gorsuch's hands clenched, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Riley, you're cherry-picking cases to prop up a losing argument. This is a stunt, not law." But his attack lacked its earlier bite, and the room sensed it. Justice Kagan interjected, her voice calm but pointed. "Counselor, clarify how Riley applies to financial data." The question was a lifeline, a chance to solidify her case, and Jasmine seized it. She explained, her words flowing like a river, connecting Riley's principles to Harper's rights with clarity that silenced even the skeptics in the crowd. The spectators leaned forward, their whispers fading, captivated by Jasmine's mastery. Justice Sotomayor nodded, her pen moving quickly, while Justice Thomas, usually silent, tilted his head, his interest clear. Gorsuch's face was a mask of frustration, his earlier mockery now a distant memory. Jasmine felt the shift, the tide, turning, and she drove her point home. "This isn't about one man. It's about every American's right to live free from government overreach. If we lose that, we lose everything." The chamber was silent, the weight of her words settling over the room like a vow. Chief Justice Roberts cleared his throat, his voice measured. "Thank you, Counselor. We'll take your arguments under advisement." Jasmine nodded, stepping back, her heart pounding with triumph. The gallery burst into murmurs, reporters scrambling to capture the moment. Gorsuch stared at her, his eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, his silence a grudging admission of her strength. As Jasmine gathered her notes, the audience's energy was electric, their faces alight with admiration. She'd walked into a lion's den, faced Gorsuch's wrath, and emerged not just unscathed but victorious. Her argument had reshaped the room, forcing even her fiercest critic to reckon with her brilliance. Outside the chamber, word of her performance spread, inspiring lawyers and citizens alike, a testament to the power of courage and intellect. Jasmine Crockett had proven she was no underdog, but a legal genius, her name now etched in the annals of the court's history, a beacon for justice that would burn bright for years to come.